my day at the Centre for Computing History in Cambridge started out badly. My phone, which I used for my alarm, lost battery at some point during the night and didn't go off. So I woke up exactly 6 minutes before I needed to leave the house. When I got to an Oyster top-up machine, I went through all the motions only to realise this particular bit of technology wasn't accepting cash. So I told it to go f*** itself and ran off to find one that could. Eventually getting to Liverpool Street, my phone suddenly pinged to say my data had run out, which meant with less than a minute till the Cambridge train would leave, I had no means of downloading my ticket. More swearing, some begging to a bemused dude looking after the ticket gates, and I had to sprint to eventually get on my train. But it was technology's fault and not mine. You know, ignoring the fact that I got on the wrong Northern Line branch. London is confusing. There's no doubt that we owe a huge amount to technology, as evidenced by my morning of technological failures. So I suppose it was only fitting that I spent the day at the Cambridge Computing Museum, where everything that would lead to the technology behind my Oyster card failures would be showcased. The Centre for Computing History in Cambridge is open from Wednesday to Sunday, and is your one-stop shop to learn everything retro and vintage computing related. The people working or volunteering there really do know their stuff about the exhibits, and the museum is run off both donations and donations of the computers themselves. Pretty much everything you see here was donated. The computers here stretch way back to the 1960s. The museum is dedicated to keeping the history of computing alive with a very much hands-on approach, where you can bring your kids or your inner child along to actually play with the computers of yesteryear.
Awesome! Peter, check it out. Look. How good is that?
And there are so many computers and consoles here that you're bound to stumble upon one that will get your nostalgia going. Like, look at this room of BBC Micros, the computers we used to have in my tiny primary school's even tinier computer room. There's a truly special feeling when you find something you used to have to play at school, even if you didn't like it at the time. And of course, as soon as I realised I could play Granny's Garden on one of these things, I was all up in it.
Wow, this is taking me back. Right, which one's Magic Tree, can you remember?
2.
I think it was 2 what?
A?
There's not enough magic in that tree.
Oh, C3.
There's not enough...
C2.
You're really bad at
It's
this.
C2.
And apparently I'm still not very good at it. That witch still makes my skin crawl. And what the hell is going on with her mouth, seriously? All of the consoles and computers are running on contemporary displays too. Look at these rare computers, look at how gorgeous this Sinclair QL is. I've never seen one before, it was really nice to stroke one. They also had a bunch of the old Apple computers too. I had a pop-up drawing a picture of Horace on this Apple. It wasn't well received. In my defence, I've never used a Cyclops mouse before. Or an Apple computer before. All these consoles were set up to have a play with, all fully accessible. It was so good to be able to see some consoles that I haven't actually got to play with before. There were some other technological bits and bobs too. I was half amused, half depressed to see the phone I had in my teens in a display cabinet. I guess I'm really getting old.
It's always D1. It's always D1.
Now, my main interests lie in consoles. I'm not really that interested in computers unless they're from, say, before 1985.
It's a modem. It's a network, isn't it?
Yeah.
It was a French network.
I can see it's in French, so I assume it was going to be a French network.
Je n'ai pas le chien, elle l'habite.
But that being said, this museum really accommodated for me. Like, look at this. This is the Elliott 903 from 1964, and it took up a fair bit of my time. One of the lovely curators took the time to set it up and demo it for me. First off, it got in a MARD for no apparent reason and wouldn't pull the tape through far enough to read the whole programme. This made me laugh because it's that kind of time-honoured thing of technology never going right when you need it to go right. Eventually he did get it going, and here was a countdown number adding game. Pretty amazing. Next up was tic-tac-toe, which apparently due to the logic of the computer is impossible to beat. By the way, this screen wasn't a normal part of the setup. Originally this would all be printed out on paper, which is why you're seeing it typed so slowly on the screen. This is what it would have looked like as it was being printed out. Later on, I was showed this program, which actually plays a tune on this thing. I don't know why I find this so cute. This thing is easily the size of the kitchen in my first flat I had in London, and from it comes the most adorable little tune. And how delightful that all this came from code stamped into a reel of paper. It really makes you appreciate how far technology has come. and also that you usually have no idea how the simplest functions on, say, your smartphone work. I was barely able to grasp how information was being transferred from holes in paper to this massive thing. And I realised that I don't even know how my computer is typing these words as I write them.
Every time, and if it's not, it's always D3. Sometimes it's A3.
There's not enough magic in that tree.
One part I especially loved was this 1970s room. It was just a dinky room, but was kitted out in what would have been absolute top-of-the-range gubbins at the time.
There's a typewriter here, look.
Yeah.
You can type.
Yeah.
I've got a sellotape pot here because sellotape used to come in a tin.
I mean, it even had a Betamax. Look at this thing. This thing is prime bludgeoning material. Not that I was thinking of using it for that at the time.
What do you think of the 70s office?
I mean, it's...
Do you like it?
What's this?
Do you like the 70s office?
One of the plus sides of having befriended a considerably more popular YouTuber is that I was able to tag along when Nostalgia Nerd was invited into the archive, a small warehouse near the museum full of all the computery gubbins which has been restored for display, or being fixed, or simply just sort of being left there until they work out what to do with it. There were so many amazing computers in here that I don't even know where to start. Some incredibly obscure ones, even prototypes and dev kits. Here's a massive PlayStation 2 dev kit. It has Tool written on the side. Tool. Here's a hench as all hell computer made of metal and clearly weighing a hell of a lot. In fact, can you please get that thing off the top shelf before it kills someone? This enormous bad boy apparently was in the main display room at some point and was being held in the archive for repair or cleaning or whatever. Now, aside from the fact this thing is hench as all hell and what you see here isn't even all of it, the computer part of it was being kept in another part of the room, the most interesting thing for me was the owner's story. Apparently, one lady was responsible for working this thing, and when she retired due to ill health, the company who employed her, presumably because this thing was the size of a damn camel, gave it to her as a parting gift. And she just left it in a barn for about 2 decades. Because I mean, what else are you really going to do with an enormous thing like this that you spent a good chunk of your working life with? Today, if someone gave me the computer from my last job before I quit SEO for good, I would have chucked it straight on eBay. But how easy would it be to sell this thing? Even if they had eBay back then, by all accounts it seems that she was the only person who really knew how to use the thing. So, in the barn it goes, I guess.
Not enough magic in that tree.
What kind of tree do they want?
Well, they want all this with magic in it.
Other wonderful things to see was stuff where components of pre-built or kit computers were found in cases made by the owners. There are a couple of computers like this, easily from the early 80s, some even older. I'm not gonna lie, they looked kind of rough and ready, but that was part of what enchanted me about them. Someone had put a lot of love and effort into making them. I bet these were pride of place in some teenager's bedroom. In fact, out of everything about these computers that fascinated me, the thought of their personal story was what interested me most. Shelves and shelves of computing history they are, but who owned them? How did they end up here? Some of them, like this microwavy bad lad, were about 800 quid simply at the time they were released. What kind of household could afford that? Did the owner scrimp and save? Was the owner affluent maybe? What kind of front rooms and offices have all these computers seen? And I know it sounds grim, but another thing that struck me was how many of the original owners of these things are now dead. I know that sounds morbid, and I guess this isn't the same thing, but this is the actual Singer sewing machine that my great-grandmother bought herself after working her arse off following the death of her husband when she was only about 22. So I think it was purchased in the late 1910s. My great-grandma died about 8 years ago at the age of 104, and I took the sewing machine when she did and started a small business making custom plushies. I mean, the business failed, but this bad girl is still going, and goddamn it's satisfying to use. But I've always felt like a part of my great-grandma is at least represented by this thing that she really treasured. Whenever I use it, which is more often than you'd think, I think about how her fingers used to roll the spinning wheel. How when she first used it, her hands were smooth and soft like mine, not leathered and wrinkly like I remember her hands being. This thing has so many stories to tell, but I'll never hear them. And when I see old computers, I wonder about the original owners in this way. Is a part of them still represented in these machines like this sewing machine was of great-grandma Ethel? When you press these keys, the ghosts of previous fingertips are shaken up. Decades of ghosts.
We already had D.
A1.
C3.
We've had C3.
Well, let's try A1.
B1.
Computing and gaming technology is moving and evolving incredibly fast. It's incredibly exciting to think what amazing things we will have access to in just a few years. But museums like this are so important to keep the birth of what makes modern life so much easier well archived. It's fascinating to look at where it all began, all the stages computers had to get through to get to your Swish gaming setup today. How many clunky iterations of data input we've worked through to get to the incredible computers businesses and scientists use today. And ultimately, the technology that failed to get me up in the morning. I guess there's still a few more years before any piece of tech can successfully do that.
B1.
Crap on it. B2.
God! Yay! We found the magic tree!